Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
Hello, good morning and a very warm welcome to Newsline, live from the Newsfirst studios here in Dawson Street in Colombo and broadcasting on TV1. And joining me this morning, minus my colleague Bandula, who's not here, is Dr. Palitha Kona, the former permanent representative of Sri Lanka to the United Nations. Dr. Kona, good morning and welcome to Newsline.
Good morning to you.
And what are you doing these days, Dr. Kona?
I do not work for the government anymore.
Okay.
I do a few consultancies. I do a few consultancies, especially for the United Nations. And then I deliver a few lectures.
I see. Dr. Kona, let me ask you this. Do you regret answering your phone on the 17th of May 2009 or thereabouts?
I have no regrets for whatever I have done. Absolutely not.
So you don't regret answering your telephone that day?
Not at all, no.
Then what happened? You answered. The charges are that you answered the telephone and you were told of some people who were going to surrender. And charges are that you didn't pass the message on.
I did not pass any such message. The message I gave to the person who phoned me was simple. I said that I am the Foreign Secretary. I am not in a position to organize any surrender whatsoever. And if people wish to surrender, especially at that late hour, there was a simple procedure. They had seen the movies, raise a white flag, and walk out. And if whatever they did after that was their business. And then I also indicated to them that the situation was so confused at that stage that nothing could be predicted. And then of course this question is asked from me over and over again. It is like saying, if somebody asked me for directions to go to Kandy, I would tell them to take the A9.
Yeah.
I met with an accident on the way. It would be a little awkward to be asked the question whether I regretted giving the directions to go to Kandy. It's a normal thing.
So who is it who called you?
It was an NGO from Europe, from Austria.
Okay. And they felt that they called you because they knew you had access to the President, to the Defense Secretary, to whom?
I think they probably thought that, and they probably thought I had access. There were a number of people whom they had been trying to get in touch with. They had my telephone number and they rang. And it was not during the day, it was in the wee hours of the morning.
Where were you?
I was in bed.
Where?
In Colombo.
In Colombo?
Yeah.
So you were in Colombo?
Yeah.
And it was early as the morning of the 18th then, was it?
Somewhere around that,
Right.
if I recollect right, yeah.
And how do you, is there any ongoing attempts to drag you into a prosecution?
I think there are two groups, mostly former LTT support groups, who have been busy in the past.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't think anybody really has made any effort. I know that certain media personnel have been raising it, largely at the provocation of these two very minor groups, but it has not gone beyond that.
Does it worry you, because Sri Lanka is not a signatory to that, but Australia is, and you also have Australian nationality.
I believe Australia would have conducted its own investigations.
Right.
And then and it's a country where the rule of law prevails, and I'm very confident on that. And they do not, as far as I know, take people before tribunals simply because allegations are made. Criminality is not established on the basis of allegations. It is based on criminality is established on the basis of evidence.
The way you say that about the law and that in Australia it's upheld, it sort of throws a bit of suspicion in my mind that you are inferring that in Sri Lanka is, or if I'm to understand that in Sri Lanka it's not so?
I'm not saying that. I'm a lawyer. I qualified as a lawyer in this country initially. I did a law degree in this country.
Yeah.
I have the utmost confidence of the legal system of Sri Lanka. I think in the past it had served this country well, and hopefully in the future also it will serve this country well.
And Dr. Coroner, now we have Field Marshal, Member of Parliament, Minister Sarath Fonseca, who has now said, only yesterday, that he welcomes foreign involvement in a fit and proper investigation into these various allegations and claims that are being made. Where do you stand on it?
I personally think that we can obtain foreign assistance, but maybe the assistance will be of a technical nature. Even during the last government, you will recall that we obtained assistance of people like Desmond Silva and others. And Desmond Silva is a UK citizen. And I think we can legitimately obtain assistance of that nature, because we may need technical skills that we may not have in this country. But I personally think that it will be a wholly different proposition to obtain foreign judges, simply because certain elements of the international community are asking for it. Because, as I said earlier, I have absolute confidence in the integrity of the judiciary of this country.
In as much as you say that about you speak of criminality and so on, are you able to touch your heart and say that there was no criminality involved when these people were trying to surrender?
I do not think that they tried to surrender. There's enough evidence to suggest that there was no intention to surrender. I do not know exactly what happened on the ground, but from anecdotal evidence, I'm confident that there was no real surrender. But again, as I said, I was not on the ground there.
Yes,
I do not know what happened.
Are you aware, has subsequent information emerged that in fact that these people were carrying a white flag and making their way towards Sri Lankan army lines?
We also have statements from other members, senior members of the LTTE, their wives, who said gave statements to the contrary.
That they were not trying to surrender?
Nobody was trying to surrender. They were not aware of anybody trying to surrender. And in fact, it doesn't sound logical for a group that carried suicide capsules around their necks to suddenly, at the last moment, to decide to surrender. I think there's something illogical about this whole proposition.
I'm not so sure that I want to agree with that. We had Prabhakaran, who was supposed to be, who had a single-minded purpose, and it's always been demonstrated that he overrode all the others. So even when it came to the peace talks, he wasn't very happy with what Anton Walasingham and the others wanted to do, which was to engage in a dialogue towards a peace process. But he preferred the military route. So in that context, where he was sort of facing defeat, don't you think that these people, it was possible that they thought to themselves, well, stuff him now, we're going to save our lives, we've backed him, we've lost, we may as well surrender?
Aren't we in the realm of speculation here? We do not know exactly what people thought. We do not know.
That's right.
What we know is that there was a person who was a megalomaniac, who was dictating terms, and it is quite possible that he said no surrender, and he from the beginning was the person who distributed cyanide capsules to ensure that nobody did really surrender. I think it is very dangerous to simply speculate on what happened and what did not happen. It is far better to stick to evidence. We have the statements of wives of former leaders of the LTT. We know what the modus operandum of the entire organization was. And what evidence, whatever we have now, are simply allegations by people who were never there. People
But
who
we
were
have
outside
the army
country.
commander who says that there were, under oath, who says that there were many people who surrendered.
We've seen hundreds of thousands of people walking across the lines, and with them there were those much earlier in the piece who came out, including Mr. Nadison and others who were senior in
But
the.
Prabhakar himself, of course, never surrendered.
That's what I believe happened.
That's what the world is led
Yes,
to believe. In
yes.
any event, he was killed in action.
Yes. Again, I am not a witness to this event. We have the evidence that of a dead body with a head blown off. I think that's where it ends, unless somebody else is willing to come forward and say, I saw something else happen.
We have had over the years many commanders who've come on various programs and given statements, interviews, whatever you like, on the lines that there was a policy of not accepting surrendees, as evidenced by the killing of the youngest son of the LTT leader.
Again, as far as we're in the realm of speculation,
How can we speculate?
I have no personal information on this, and I certainly would not wish to get into a discussion which simply is based on allegations and speculative suggestions.
Anyway, it's sort of water under the bridges. But how important is it to have accountability?
I've taken the view that the average Sri Lankan soldier is a decent guy who went to war when the country needed him to go to war. Maybe there were bad apples, like we did not send 200,000 saints to war.
Yeah.
There could have been the bad apple here and there.
Was
When an individual
Yeah.
breaches the rules,
Yeah.
there is a criminal breach of conduct, and you need to deal with that individual under the criminal law as it prevails. And we have enough provisions to deal with that sort of situations.
Do you think that the former Defence Secretary, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, is one of these bad apples?
Why should he be the bad apple when he was the man who led the country in a war that got rid of terrorism?
So what does that say of Sarat Fonseca?
Again, as I said, I wouldn't want to comment on individuals.
No,
I
but
don't think
you
it's
say
fair
that,
for
you
me.
say that Gotabaya Rajapaksa led him. He was merely an administrative man. Surely we mustn't take it away from Sarat Fonseca.
Sarat Fonseca was the commander of the army at the time,
Yeah.
and played a very critical role,
Yeah.
and I think a seminal role
Yeah.
in ending the terrorist conflict in this country.
When you were close to the you've been close to the heartbeat of power and so on for several years, and especially during the war, you were there. Did you get the feeling that our government at the time was intent on paying very little attention or almost lip service to a negotiated settlement, that they were not really...
I would contradict that absolutely. I was doing a senior job at the United Nations.
Yeah.
I was invited to come back
Yeah.
so that there could be, I could assist in the negotiations with LTT. In 2006, when I came back, we had 3 rounds of negotiations resumed with LTT. I believe the first round was if I remember right, in February, then in June, and later in October. I led the negotiating team to Oslo in June. And on every occasion, it was the LTT that walked away, not the government of Sri Lanka.
Do you think, Dr. Corner, that in the peace that we are now enjoying out here in the streets of Colombo and everywhere else actually, do you think that, and there is no white vans now, anything of the sort, but Do you think this ambience that we are now enjoying would have been possible if if Prabhakaran was alive and there was a negotiated settlement? What would that settlement have been?
Again, I don't think Prabhakaran, and this is my honest opinion, was ever interested in negotiated settlement.
Right.
He wanted a military solution. He wanted his piece of real estate to rule over.
Right.
As his name suggests, the creator of light. The creator of light wanted a piece of real estate to rule over, and he was intent on a military approach to achieve his objectives. And I do not think if that happened, we would have had peace in this country. I mean, I can go at length into this, what you just suggested, analyzing it, because if you created a separate state in the north and the east with no water resources, very few other resources, do you think there would have been peace along the border for any length of time? We've seen the examples of Eritrea and Ethiopia. We've seen other examples around the world where do-gooding outsiders had thought Sudan and South Sudan thought peace could be introduced by separating states. It does not happen like that. It does not happen like that.
Let's take a short commercial break and find out how well Sri Lanka is doing in this new ambience of peace. Do stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Newsline. Good morning, and we continue with the former permanent representative of Sri Lanka to the United Nations, Dr. Palitha Korona. Dr. Korona, do you think the best army commander in the world, did he deserve the title?
I think he was a great army commander. I'm no doubt about that. And the country has now conferred on him an exceptional title. He's now Field Marshal Sarat Fonseca. I think at the time, people like him were indispensable for ending the terrorist conflict. You have to remember, this was not just another war, it was a terrorist conflict. There was a time when your children could not go to school without you being on tenterhooks all the time while they were away. There was a time when husbands and wives traveled to work in separate vehicles because they had no assurance of coming home together.
True. But within all that ambience, there has been. Why was then General Sarat Fonseca locked up?
Again, I was not here. I do not know the details of that situation. There was a process, and that's what happened. And again, you know, I think there are things that happen which I simply I'm not in a position to.
But it strikes, if you bear with me, okay, it strikes me that there was an intense and systematic effort on the part of the Rajapaksa administration to use people and then to dump them. General Fonseca is one such statistic. The history of that period is littered with such events. There are people who tried their best and then labeled traitors. People who asked for peace and who wrote about peace were labeled traitors. It was a wonderful word for them.
I'm not sure as to where you're coming from.
What I want to know is, why is it that, you know, the war was won, they declared that General Fonseca was the best army commander in the world, and then the army commander then decides he wants to go into politics, and then his world collapsed all around him. So, and therefore there was this great show of apparent ingratitude.
See, one comment I would like to make here is that I have always kept out of domestic politics in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
I came back to Sri Lanka when a country asked me to come back to serve a particular need. I'm very proud that I had that opportunity.
When did you finish your term then?
As ambassador?
Yeah.
Yes, last March.
Right. So
March 2015, after the change of government.
And your relationship with the President Rajapaksa until then was on a level footing?
I think he was my president. I reported to him as the appointing authority, and it was a good, effective relationship.
And did you have good access to him?
I did.
So he took your calls. Did he listen to you?
See, when you're the president of a country, you listen, but as to whether you comply with all the requests and demands made by officers working for you is a different matter. A president has to rule a country, and that involves balancing of a whole range of mostly complex.
Before I ask you my next question, I've got to ask you an interim question. Are you more Sri Lankan or Australian in terms of your allegiances?
I did serve Sri Lanka at a time when most people, I came back here at a time when most people are leaving the country.
Okay.
I came to the middle of a conflict that many thought could not be ended. And in fact, when I came back, most of my colleagues in the Western embassies, high commissions in Colombo, thought that the LTT could not be defeated. In fact, their counsel consistently was, do not take on them militarily.
Okay, then here's my question. As a Sri Lankan, are you now feeling so much better that Sarath Fonseca's had his rank and his medals and his whole position restored?
It's not a question of feeling better. He's had his position restored. He's had this very important title conferred on him. It's not a question of feeling better or not, or feeling better. It's a fact. And
yes, but I and a number of let's say my friends, my network, were deeply upset that our army commander was hobnobbing with the inmates at the Colombo prison. To us, that was the height of ingratitude, and on charges that now turns out to be just fixed. Spurious.
This is I suppose out of the country at this time, and I do not. I had no real access to the details of what went on.
Yes, no, I was just asking you. We of course believe that all terrorists should be eliminated, but equally we believe that the truth must emerge, and if people have done wrong, then if it's possible to identify them, then that's what should be done. But there's also this growing feeling that this ingratitude was growing and growing and growing, and people were being victimized. And so that's why I was asking you, as a Sri Lankan, do you sit back and say, well, things are looking better now?
Things were looking better since we ended the conflict in this country. Since May 2009, you will recall the spontaneous outbursts of joy in the streets of Colombo and elsewhere in the country on the 19th, 20th, 21st, etc. You'll recall all that.
Yes.
So the country has been doing better since then. We now walk the streets without anyone being checked. We go to work in the morning, come back home without worrying about being blown to pieces. Our economy started to boom since about 2010.
Yeah.
There's a sense of freedom in this country, and I'm sure you have reasons for entertaining the type of thoughts you just explained.
But I enjoy all of those, but I am also proud that our army commander has been restored to the position that he rightly deserves. And if there are allegations of whatever, well, we'll look into them. But it wasn't on for... We appeared to have, for a time, two sets of army commanders. One was the defense secretary, called Gotabaya Rajapaksa, and the other was the real army commander, Sarat Fonseca. There appeared to be two armies. There was an army within the army.
If I recall right, they worked very well together at the time the conflict was.
So it was only a question of.
It was the conflict, when the conflict was raging, the two of them worked very well together, and it was a unique relationship. And I personally believe that it was because of that unique relationship that we ended the conflict when we did it. And you have to remember that Sri Lanka is perhaps the one country that managed to eliminate a terrorist group that actually controlled territory.
But I also want to believe that to think that we've been saved, because at one point it appeared that Sri Lanka would be the only country in the world that would have an elected king. I think the king thought that everybody else, including Sarat Fonseca, was his servant. And thankfully we have not just a modicum, but we do have a robust democracy now. And I can assure you that we wouldn't be having this conversation if the results of January 2015 were different.
I believe that Sri Lanka always had a democracy, an effective democracy. Yeah. We have elected prime ministers, presidents, and thrown them out of office also with equal vigor. So we just did what we are used to doing. We changed governments, we changed presidents, we changed prime ministers, and to go on. And who knows, at the next elections there might be another change.
Almost the final question: do you think that General Fonseca, Field Marshal now, Minister and so on, do you think don't you think that we should admire him, because he's now come forward and he's defending those very troops that saved us?
I think it's incumbent on every Sri Lankan to feel proud of the troops led by General Fonseca, who changed the history of this country. All Sri Lankans must have a sense of pride in them, because we are enjoying a lot today that we could not for 30 years, because they sacrificed that today so that we could have it tomorrow.
Indeed. I want to also acknowledge the contribution of my colleagues in this network, who were burnt, bombed, attacked, stoned, even Claymore bombs, and they're still here, visiting the rural mass of Sri Lanka on this Gam Mather door-to-door program, unearthing the real Sri Lanka, where we find abject poverty and help and very little hope, and we're working towards identifying that and hopefully assisting them to make a difference, to enjoy this peace and this democracy that we've been talking of this morning. Dr. Kona, will you come back on one of our other programs, and so that we can discuss at greater length the international dimension?
I would be delighted to do that. And in addition, I would like to talk about the conditions in this country in the rural areas. In fact, I do not live in Colombo. I live in my village, way
Good.
up.
Do follow the Gam Mather door-to-door campaign.
I do.
Thank you this morning for being on Newsline. We appreciate your presence, and thank you for watching Newsline. We hope you've enjoyed the program, and we are off, some of us off to the big match today. But in the meantime, let's wish you a good day, take care, and God bless.
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.